I forced my boyfriend to do the dishes. My boyfriend Jake and I had been living together for about 6 months, and he was one of those guys who thought the dishes would magically clean themselves. He'd use every pot, pan, and plate in the kitchen, making some random sandwich, then leave everything sitting there like he was expecting a cleaning fairy to show up. At first, I tried the normal girlfriend approach. I'd ask nicely, leave little notes, even bought him his own special dish soap thinking maybe he'd get the hint. Nothing worked. The sink would be overflowing with gross, crusty dishes for days until I finally caved and did them myself because I couldn't stand living in filth. This went on for months until one Tuesday when I came home from work completely exhausted. I'd been covering extra shifts at the coffee shop because rent was due, and I was looking forward to maybe ordering takeout and watching Netflix. Instead, I walked into what looked like a tornado had hit our kitchen. There were dishes piled so high in the sink that some had fallen onto the counter. The smell was awful, like something had actually died in there. Jake was sitting on the couch playing video games with his headset on, completely oblivious to the disaster zone behind him. I stood there for a good 5 minutes just staring at the mess, feeling my blood pressure rising. When I asked him about it, he barely looked away from his screen and said, "Oh yeah, I'll get to it later," in that tone that told me he definitely would not get to it later. That's when I snapped and came up with my plan. I went to our bedroom, grabbed every single piece of Jake's clothing from his dresser and closet, and dumped it all in the bathtub. Then I turned on the cold water. When he finally came to see what all the noise was about, he found his favorite hoodie, his work clothes, his expensive sneakers, everything just floating around in freezing water. He freaked out and started yelling about his clothes, asking what was wrong with me. I just shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, I'll get to turning off the water later," using the exact same tone he'd used on me. The look on his face was priceless. I told him the water would stay on until every single dish in that kitchen was clean, dried, and put away. He tried to argue, saying it wasn't fair and that his clothes were getting ruined. I reminded him that I'd been asking nicely for months and he'd ignored me every time. So now we were doing things my way. He stood there for another few minutes trying to guilt trip me, but I just sat on the couch and turned on his video game. Finally, he stomped into the kitchen and started aggressively scrubbing plates while muttering under his breath about how crazy I was. It took him almost 2 hours to get through everything because he'd let some of the food get so dried on that it was practically cemented to the dishes. The whole time I could hear him in there grumbling and slamming things around, but I didn't care. I was just happy to finally hear the sound of running water and scrubbing instead of video game explosions. When he finally finished, I went and turned off the bathtub faucet. His clothes were soaked, but not actually ruined. Just needed to go through the wash a couple extra times. He was still mad at me for the rest of the night, but something funny happened the next day. I came home from work and the kitchen was spotless. Not just clean, but actually organized better than I'd ever seen it. Jake had even wiped down the counters and swept the floor. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said he figured he should probably start pulling his weight around the house. From that day on, he started doing the dishes right after he used them without me having to ask.